Okay, folks, welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show. I shouldn't say welcome back because you guys didn't go anywhere. We took a break. And while we were taking a break, if you ran off and grabbed your favorite beverage, great. And we certainly hope you're passing the word around and letting people know about the show. It's always great to have new listeners. And because Joe and I, we like to think that we have some interesting information to share with people. Just like we did in the last little bit, talking about curfews and coronavirus. As much as both of us are really tired of talking about the topic, it is one of the two topics that seems to be demanding all the attention. The other one, of course, is, I could sum this up in one word, Trump. Whether you like him or hate him, he's still in the news, and probably will be for quite a while. Now, Joseph, you've been watching what's going on in the United States today specifically, and I've been keeping an eye on it, but I think you're a little more plugged into it than I am. Why don't you tell us what you were seeing and what your impressions are?
Well, first of all, Nick, for people who are listening to us on the podcast, it is okay to say welcome back, because they presumably did go somewhere, or we did. Anyway, so just wanted to get that out of the way, rather than the live show. It's kind of like COVID-19. Okay. It's the subject that won't stop, it won't go away, and that's the U.S. election. And I don't know that it's entirely fair to just sort of sum it up in one word, and that's Trump, because I think you could sum it up in one word, and Trump might be one of the words you'd use, but maybe two words: democratic idiocy, fake news. I could come up with all kinds of descriptives. But look, here's the situation as it stands now this evening. When we taped this show, it's on Wednesday, and so the U.S. Congress has voted to accept the quote-unquote Electoral College votes. So from a constitutional point of view, that's the end of the road. You're going to have a Biden administration. There it is. I watched the Trump speech today, and it was actually a good speech. I think he spoke well. It wasn't outrageous. It wasn't over the top. I was a little concerned when, he talked about how, okay, from here we're heading over to the Capitol Hill, and I'm paraphrasing, by the way, this is not necessarily an exact quote, and he said, and we're going to make sure that they do the right thing. Some people could hear that and say, okay, that's an incitement to violence. And, if I'm Trump, or if I'm advising Trump, I would probably say, don't use that language, because, you may have some people in the crowd who are going to use that. It's not necessary for you to say things that could be interpreted as encouraging, if not violence, let's just say unnecessarily aggressive behavior. Anyway, so there were a lot of people there. I don't know if I'd say there were 1 million people, but there were lots of people. And they do march on Capitol Hill. Mm-hmm. And there was some scuffling and some broken windows, etc. And in fairness, when that kind of thing started to happen, Trump went out and he made an announcement, not at Capitol Hill, but he was back at the White House. And he said, no violence. People should go home now. Let's not do to them what the Democrats have done to us all summer in terms of violence. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's more or less what his message was. So, he did tell people to, calm down. We shouldn't be tolerating violence. We shouldn't be doing any kind of vandalism. Let's set a good example. And so he did that. That was covered on the news networks, etc. He tweeted it. And then apparently the Twitter prevented that tweet, asking people to stay calm and to, they've made their point, go home now, from the president. Twitter blocked the ability of people to retweet it on the grounds that the president was somehow or other possibly inciting violence, which, we talked in the last segment about insanity, okay? And the sort of the colloquial definition of insanity. Not the clinical definition, but, well, surely to goodness this has to classify as insanity. That the closer to clinical insanity, too, by the way, where the president puts out a tweet saying, stay calm, please don't be violent, you made your point, go home, words to that effect. Again, I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing. And Twitter says, by using those words, we're not going to allow you to retweet that because that's inciting violence. I just, Nick, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, it is so absurd.
No, you can't.
And then, just one last point on that, Nick, and then shortly thereafter, CTV posts a story, CTV being the one of the major television networks here in Canada, or media networks in Canada now because they own a number of radio stations. CTV posts a story on their website claiming that Trump did not ask protesters to stand down. Now, why CTV would post anything like this, I don't know. I mean, what was the point? The story is that they're denying somebody said that Trump said this. I mean, that's a story. I don't get it. But categorically, emphatically, 100% wrong CTV was on that. Now, I haven't seen them take it down. I haven't seen them retracting that particular headline. But can you imagine that CTV posts a story saying that Trump didn't ask protesters to stand down? And I'm thinking, I just saw him do it.
Why would you put it up in the first place?
Why would you? That's my point. Why would you put it on in the first place? I don't know. But look, it's just, the whole thing is quite surreal. The only thing I will say about all of this is, having said all of that, really, I just think it's time to move on. I think that Donald Trump did not lose fair and square. Biden did not win fair and square, but fair and square or not, he did win, albeit with cheating. But, they won. They won with cheating. And it's time to move on, not accept the results with good grace, but to become determined to find ways to prevent cheating in the future. I think that's the only response that's left. That's my personal view. By the way, they're imposing a 6 p.m. curfew in Washington, D.C.
I think you're quite right.
I just wanted to point that out, Nick, that we were talking about curfews in the last segment. They are imposing a curfew in Washington, D.C.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And I was watching on
under certain
live
circumstances, curfews.
Yeah, I was just watching a live feed at here it is, local time here in Ottawa is 8:43, and there are still like hundreds of people congregating on the streets over there. And the police are dealing with it quite calmly. There's no fisticuffs or anything going on. Not like what you saw with some of the protests from left-wingers, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, etc., over the course of the summer and the fall.
Well, it's funny how there's a marked difference between when people like who rallied today protest and Antifa protests. I mean, these are completely different animals. There's a lot of people will go out and protest for Donald Trump, and when it's over, they'll go home. With Antifa, they look for trouble. They go trying to stage trouble. I mean, I'm not saying anything I don't think anybody doesn't already know, that these people are just looking to cause trouble for the trouble's sake. Remember what part of their agenda is, the defunding of police. So the more situations they can create where the police seem to be the bad guy, they're trying to egg them on into situations that would lead to, people like the city of Vancouver, or what was it? Was it Oakland?
Portland.
Was a city who defunded its police, or was it Portland? That was it.
Portland or Seattle.
Got what they wanted. Yeah. I think it will probably both, but the bottom line is they got what they wanted. Then they had to call the police in to deal with the violence. Call in somebody else's police to deal with the violence.
Minneapolis also.
Minneapolis, that was it. Yeah. So, these people have an agenda, and they're using massive crowds they can hide in like this. Like, I don't think this is Trump-supported people who are supporting Trump doing this at all. You might have some people lose their temper and maybe, get a little rough, but in general, the people who support Donald Trump support the rule of law. They're interested in maintaining the democracy and the Constitution and the rule of law. They're not out there to tear the country down. They want to build it up. Where Antifa and the Democrats are very busy trying to do this great reset, do this whole turn it into some socialist utopia, and for that they got to tear down capitalism and everything it stands for. So they'll do anything to make that happen, even when it comes to violence. And if somebody gets hurt or killed in the process, oh well, casualty of war. That's just the way it is. So these kinds of things are really, really frustrating to watch. You can see, the numbers of people there. When you consider the numbers of people on the streets and the amount of violence there was, the two don't correlate. You had hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Washington, and yet the violence was contained to Capitol Hill and a few other little spots. Nothing like if 100,000 people went on a rampage, they'd burn the city to the ground. We didn't see any of that.
No, and I'm just actually looking to see if I can find a live feed on YouTube, and at the moment I can't, which is a little surprising. Oh, well, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, what do you think, Nick? I mean, is it time to move on? Am I really off base about that?
No, I think it's time. I think you're quite right. Like, Trump's going to be a factor in American politics for at least the next 4 years. And it would be nice if the Democrats would just accept that, stop stoking the fires of division, which is something they're very good at, and at least make an attempt at governance. I mean, they've got issues outside of Capitol Hill that they have to deal with, one of which is Iran. Iran has decided that it's going to start up its uranium enrichment program, and the timing is suspect, to say the least. I mean, why did they do it once they knew that Joe Biden was going to win and not before? How come it's a big deal now? And I think the answer is because you have very weak leadership in the White House that you didn't have in the previous 4 years, because under no circumstances can anyone imagine Trump sitting by and letting this happen.
Right, but we're going to get into that in the next segment anyway. So that's okay. It's not a problem, Nick.
Live for there.
Okay, so go ahead.
I was just going to say that we'll set that aside for now, but for all intents and purposes, this is a complete failure, not only of respect for the Constitution, but the mainstream media and the social platforms like Twitter, a complete failure of what they're there for. The mainstream media is, I saw on CNN, somebody on CNN was saying we have to stop saying we have to respect Trump supporters. Well, there's like 75 or 80 million of them. And you say you shouldn't show them that every single one of them was a redneck. Every single one of them was, a hillbilly from West Virginia. Every single one of them was, one tooth and knuckle dragging and breathing through the mouth kind of slug that they don't deserve any respect. Every one of them. I mean, this is why mainstream media is dying, and is why their ratings. I was listening to a terrestrial radio station brag about its market share, and I laughed out loud and I said, yeah, so you've got more of a smaller pie. So what?